KYC/AML automation with Azure AI, a practical architecture. KYC/AML automation with Azure AI, a practical architecture. That's what we're tackling today. If you've been wondering about KYC AML automation, stick around. Next up, now, why KYC/AML automation has become non-negotiable. Manual KYC review doesn't just slow onboarding. It introduces inconsistency. Two analysts reviewing the same document package often reach different risk ratings, which creates defensibility problems when regulators ask why you approved a particular customer. Banks processing more than 10,000 new accounts per month typically see manual review costs exceed $50 per application, once you factor in analyst time, error correction, and re-review cycles. The regulatory pressure is straightforward. FinCEN and the Financial Action Task Force both expect financial institutions to have controls proportionate to their risk exposure. "We reviewed everything manually" is not a convincing answer when your transaction volume reaches millions per month. Regtech solutions sit between your raw banking data and your compliance obligations. They translate transaction records, customer profiles, and document scans into structured risk signals that analysts and regulators can act on. The global regtech market grew from $9.7 billion in 2022 to an estimated $21.7 billion in 2026, driven largely by the cost economics of automating BSA/AML compliance. Next up, the Azure services that power KYC/AML banking compliance software. Azure for banking compliance workloads is a well-documented use case. Microsoft holds FedRAMP High authorization and maintains compliance certifications relevant to financial services, including ISO 1, ISO 2, PCI DSS, and ISO 27001. That matters because your auditors will ask about your cloud provider's compliance posture, not just your application's configuration. Azure AI Document Intelligence handles the document extraction layer in KYC workflows. It extracts structured data from passports, driver's licenses, utility bills, and corporate registration documents with accuracy above 95% for supported document types. You pair this with Azure Face API for liveness detection and identity photo matching, though you need to review Microsoft's responsible AI terms carefully before deploying facial recognition in any customer-facing context. Azure Cognitive Search handles name screening against sanctions lists and PEP databases. Combined with fuzzy matching logic, it identifies high-risk individuals even when names are transliterated differently across document sources. A starting threshold of Jero Winkler 0.85 works reasonably well for name matching, but expect to tune this over the first 3 to 6 months of live data. Next up, moving on to how to automate KYC/AML compliance, a practical architecture. How to automate KYC/AML compliance comes down to 4 distinct stages: identity verification, risk scoring, ongoing monitoring, and case management. Each stage has different latency requirements and different data sensitivity levels, which drives your Azure service selection. The document verification stage runs synchronously during customer onboarding. A customer submits ID documents, and within 30 to 90 seconds, the system returns a verification result. The processing sequence works like this. When confidence falls below a defined threshold, the application routes to a human reviewer queue rather than auto-approving or auto-rejecting. That human checkpoint is not optional from a regulatory standpoint. It's where HITL governance for banking becomes a technical requirement, not just a philosophy. Next up, let's talk about what financial services cloud migration actually requires. Financial services cloud migration to Azure for KYC/AML workloads is not a lift and shift exercise. The architecture must satisfy both technical requirements and regulatory expectations. OCC Bulletin 2023-17 and parallel FDIC guidance expect banks to demonstrate ongoing oversight of cloud-hosted critical functions, not just point-in-time compliance at deployment. Before you migrate anything, categorize your compliance workloads by data sensitivity and regulatory classification. Core KYC data sits under the strictest controls: encryption at rest with customer-managed keys in Azure Key Vault, data residency constraints, and access logging at the individual record level. AML transaction data has different retention requirements under BSA regulations, typically 5 years minimum. Azure Policy and Azure Blueprints let you encode these requirements as guardrails that enforce themselves. If a developer creates a storage account without encryption or a database without private endpoint connectivity, the deployment fails at provisioning time. This is far more reliable than documentation and training alone. For the infrastructure baseline, Azure Landing Zones explained for mid-size companies covers what a compliant landing zone actually includes for regulated workloads. Now, next up, fraud detection software, adding AI intelligence to the pipeline. Fraud detection software in a KYC/AML context targets specific financial crime typologies, structuring, layering, account takeover, and synthetic identity fraud. Each typology has different behavioral signatures and different data requirements, which is why generic anomaly detection tools rarely work without significant customization. Real-time transaction monitoring uses Azure Event Hubs as the ingestion layer, with a stream processing application such as Azure Stream Analytics applying rules and ML scoring to each transaction as it arrives. Suspicious transactions generate alerts within seconds, not hours. The architecture that works in practice: a rules engine runs first, followed by ML scoring for borderline cases. This two-tier approach keeps latency low while giving you the nuance that pure rules-based systems miss. Rules are easier to explain to examiners. ML catches the patterns rules miss. Now, next up, governance and human oversight in automated compliance. Automating KYC/AML processes does not mean removing human judgment. It means applying human judgment where it matters most, at escalation points, model validation checkpoints, and high-risk case reviews. The compliance teams that get this right spend their human capacity on decisions that actually require human reasoning, rather than on document checks that a machine handles with higher consistency. No regulator accepts the algorithm decided as a complete compliance explanation. OCC examiners and FDIC auditors expect banks to show that humans understand, supervise, and can override automated decisions. This requires specific technical implementation, human review queues with SLA tracking, override logging with reason codes, and escalation paths that activate when model confidence drops below threshold. Our HITL governance principles translate directly into these system requirements. Every automated compliance decision should have a corresponding human review path for edge cases, with audit trails that demonstrate the governance structure was actually used, not just documented on paper. Next up, moving on to what to look for in a banking software development company. Selecting a banking software development company to build or extend your KYC/AML automation system is a decision where compliance context matters more than raw technical capability. Most competent development firms can write the code. Fewer understand what questions to ask before writing any. Fintech software development for compliance systems requires specific experience, familiarity with BSA/AML regulatory frameworks, hands-on experience configuring Azure for banking workloads under compliance constraints, and the ability to produce documentation that satisfies regulatory examination, not just technical code review. Ask your prospective partner whether they have worked with OCC or FDIC examiners on a cloud-hosted compliance system, whether they can produce a data flow diagram mapping each data element to its regulatory classification, and what their approach to model governance and model risk management looks like. If that last question produces confusion, they don't have the compliance depth you need. For context on what the full banking software development process involves before signing a statement of work, banking software development, what you need to know before starting covers the scoping decisions that most teams underestimate. Let's talk about next up, conclusion. KYC/AML automation on Azure is achievable for mid-market financial institutions without building a proprietary AI research team. The Azure Service Stack, from document intelligence to Azure ML to Event Hubs, covers the core compliance use cases. What separates successful builds from expensive ones is architectural discipline, mapping regulatory requirements to technical controls before writing code, building human oversight into the system from the start rather than adding it afterward, and choosing a banking software development company that understands both the engineering and the regulatory context. If you're planning a KYC/AML automation build or a financial services cloud migration to Azure, the architecture decisions made in the first few weeks shape every constraint that follows. That's where experienced fintech software development partners and a clear understanding of regtech solutions available on Azure make the most difference.